we have Garry Connolly, and Gary's calling in from the greater Dublin metro area. He's a digital optimist, and he's actually a podcast host himself of a show called Bits, Bytes, and Banter. And Garry has what he calls a specific pollinator plan for the global digital infrastructure industry. That is a mouthful. He's going to tell us about that. We're going to learn more about why data centers need so much power, why they're having such an impact globally on the energy industry. One of Gary's heroes is Nelson Mandela. We're going to touch on that and a lot more today. Garry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here, Peter. Thank you for the invite.
It is an absolute pleasure. We're excited to have you here all the way from Dublin. I think you're our first guest from Ireland so far. And it's an amazing country with a long history. So maybe we'll touch a little on that too. But first, I'd like to get into your role within the global digital infrastructure industry and talk more about this, what you call specific pollinator plan. That's an incredible title and it's intriguing. So we'd love to learn more.
Yeah, I hope we can help your listeners. If I understand, it's a wide cohort of people interested in energy, electricity, and all things that surround it. So I guess the best place for me to start is to say we're in the fourth industrial revolution. And thanks to your people on this call who really were the catalyst behind the second one when electricity replaced steam to change the world, we might be able to bring you through the different phases of why the fourth industrial revolution or evolution is driven by data. Because as I say, the first one was steam, the second one was electricity, the third one was microchips, and now we're on the data space. So I guess it's when we think about that for a moment, we think about evolutions. And I guess that's what we're all trying to do. And I was really interested in what you said earlier about this is Energy Hero. Is this what this particular thing is called? This session, the hero? I've never ever been called a hero before. And if you're a father of children, particularly young girls, that hero thing ends around 10 years old. I'm glad that I'm now being called a hero again. So energy, electricity, data centers, digital infrastructure. I guess what the way I see the world right now is that change has never happened at such speed. You know, we talk about sort of how long did it take to get 50 million motor cars? Well, it took nearly 3 decades. How long did it take to get 50 million smart speakers? Well, it actually took 9 months. So when you talk about speeds of change, then the mediums that we're using, like social media, like infrastructure that we're lying out with AI, etc., that's where our two worlds collide, because data centers or digital infrastructure, which is my world, really are just large buildings that have one raw material. And that one raw material is electrons. That's it. That's the raw material coming in is electrons. And what goes back out the other side is what's called smart data or data. And, you know, I use the word smart there because I meet a lot of people that maybe are on this call who are policymakers or city planners, etc. And when they meet a data center guy and he says, I want 20 megawatts of secure power, please, next week, they scratch their head and they say, how on God's name could you need that amount of power? That took us 30 years to get there for our second largest metro city. The reason that we basically need, and digital infrastructure needs that amount of electricity, is because inside of the building is machines. If the first industrial revolution was steam and spinning jennies and stuff, inside these data centers are also machines called servers, file servers, and they need electricity to function. They're the hardware, and on that hardware is where the server software data resides. So unlike a lot of other industries that you have an alternative to how do you electrify a server, in this case, we don't. So therefore, when you consider that when COVID arrived only 3 years ago, our use of digital data increased threefold in 6 months. So the amount of data that we were consuming, either from working from home, online schooling, digitalization in our houses for streaming mechanism, that went up 300% in 6 months. That means really you've got 300% increase in the amount of data going out, and that's why we need more electricity going in. That's where our two worlds sort of collide and intersect, and the scale has never been seen before for single requests for connections. Even I don't know if your listeners, even large cities are 30 to 40 to 50 megawatts. So this is one building, and it's a head scratcher. But I think what we have to understand is that the data that's in the centers. So there's two words in data center: the center and the data. And then that data has all sorts of names put towards it. And mostly it's to do with sort of running your hospital systems, running your smart cities, running your smart grids. When you think about this whole concept of the smart grid, it's actually not smart because of hardware. It's smart because of software algorithms that are telling the hardware to do things. So all of that data goes into a location. We got to keep the rain off all this mission critical data, and that's where the center comes in. And I often find when I'm talking to people is they think that big data centers only have Facebook and Google and maybe all the social media platforms, when in actual fact, it really is, Peter, all those servers that we used to stick in underneath our stairwells or in the back of the office, underneath the office manager's desk. All those servers have sort of disappeared to a greater degree. Thank goodness, because if anyone remembers, you used to get the cleaning lady to come in and she'd, I need a plug. The whole system would go down. So effectively, when you think about 2023 and you think about sort of the world we're in and the challenges we have, the two massive mega trends that I come across, and many of your listeners will be the same, is decarbonization of everything. Decarbonization of what we bite, as in farming, what we buy, where we buy it from, and what we burn. The three B's. It's not really overly sophisticated. And where we then see the how we gonna do all those things, how are we gonna make them more efficient? I would challenge anyone on the call to tell me they can do that without a screen or multiple screens or thousands of screens or Internet of Things and all these other things. And all of those things that were then needed to decarbonize are digital. So that's why you see this massive other mega trend called digitalization. So decarbonization nearly grows digitalization. And that's why we see they can seem disheartening, they can nearly seem sort of helping you do that without that. But in actual fact, if a data center needs 100 megawatts, the smart data that in our economy could be reducing 500 megawatts. So we're not quite there yet, Peter, visualizing, well, what's the delta? And that's why we talked about change, didn't we? See, our minds don't all change at the same time.
No, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. And I think one trend that maybe people are missing is that this move to digitalization and the increase in the amount of data centers themselves have huge power requirements. So as you're building more and more data centers, and that demand's only going to increase. You gave the quote about how much increase it was just during COVID with people going online. But then I think as we move into virtual worlds and the metaverse, which I personally think is going to be driven by work environments initially, that's going to only increase it more. And people are not rushing back to the office. They're really enjoying this remote work environment and finding they can be more productive. So that's just going to mean more data centers, which have more power needs. And that's going to make the whole decarbonization challenge even bigger, in that we have more needs for megawatts. How are we going to deal with it? And then I think your point on digitalization itself is well taken. Internet of Things and using software to reduce energy consumption or make it more efficient overall is going to be a huge need. And then the last thing I want to touch on is data centers have they have power requirements that are solid, essential, and continuous. So you can't necessarily rely on intermittent, unreliable sources of power. You need continuous power. So how are we going to get decarbonized power that's reliable? I think is our huge challenge when it comes to both data centers and the broader economy.
I think exactly. I agree completely with what you're suggesting. I think the whole new concept, and it is new and it's only evolving, of the prosumer is way more than just the boy or the girl that has solar panels on their roof, where they basically can sell a few kilowatts to the grid when they have over excess and draw it down when they need it. This is where large energy users like data centers, if I take Ireland as an example, they basically have all a UPS, which is a BESS, and on-site generation to give them the 7x24. So what we're now starting to see as industries, remember, data centers as an asset class are only here 15 years, 15, and yet they've become the most critical asset. There has never been such a critical asset so quickly since electricity as a utility. And that's how we should start to think of data. It's a utility in the same way as water, in the same way as other utilities that we've had in the past. So if we could turn, and listen, when people are designing something the first time, they're so risk averse. They want to build islands around them. And even the data center people, they want it to sound so sophisticated that they don't want anyone to touch it, right? Now, as we go to the second and third wave, because new technologies are much quicker to be deployed, we're now seeing data center people say, oh, you know what? 70+% of our operating expenses is electricity. Is there any way that we could, and even if you're a multi-trillion company, 70% is 70%. And if you can reduce that price or offset that price or hedge that price by being a prosumer, then that matters. So not only are you reducing your OPEX, you're providing backup utility best with your UPSs, so that now you're starting to see nearly most modern data centers have a interactive UPS that acts like a BESS. Brilliant, fantastic. You have on-site generation that traditionally would have been diesel generators, which are now running off cooking oil. Fantastic, wonderful. So now what we're starting to see is this confluence of people aren't as scared to explore because they know it works. Whereas at the start, before they prove the concept, they're not sure that they can even trust themselves. Now we're starting to see, oh, what does a modern grid need? Well, a modern grid with variable sources like wind, like solar, needs a constant supply. It also needs an iron, as somebody calls it, an iron like batteries. Well, data centers can give you that consistent power, a base load, 24/7. They have on-site generation now because they have to for their service level agreements that are sitting mostly in the corner 99% of the year. And they also now have their ways of, with the data, actually distributing load. You know how hard it is to distribute electrons. It's not so hard to do it with photons, which is data. So now what we're starting to see is, oh, the data center in Phoenix has actually got an excess of power. Let's bring some of the work, push some of the workloads down there. Yeah, push some of the workloads down servers. And so you're actually starting to see that smart distribution of follow the sun or follow the wind or follow the solar. And you know how hard it is. People on this call know better than I do to move electrons around. It requires a lot of heavy gridiron substations and all. Great thing about data is it just needs a load of fiber.
No, absolutely. Tell me about the pollinator part. So specific pollinator plan. When I hear that, when I hear pollinator, I think of bees.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
So in isolation, I can't jump into the pollinators without sort of overarching. Why did we arrive at sort of doing what we did for the pollinators? Well, 10 years ago, when I was working out an airnout, I had a bet with some of my competitors that I couldn't get them all to come together because I was on this non-compete thing, right? And I said, I wonder, they won't allow me to go back into the industry, but will they stop me from bringing all my competitors together? So that's why we set up Host in Ireland, right? I said, all the competitors all come together and sit down, leave your ego at the door, leave your own balance sheet at the door. And what we found, Peter, or what I found reasonably young age, which I was so encouraged by, was that most people are suffering at high positions for what's called professional loneliness. And professional loneliness, for your listeners, is something that we're too egotistic to admit, but we're meant to know all the answers when we get to a certain level in an organization. So we can't really be buddies with our staff. We can't. We're beholden to our shareholders, and we're always this big, very impressive know-all when we go in front of the audiences as keynotes, and you end up being quite lonely. You end up being quite lonely because you've nobody just to say, "You having that problem as well? What did you do?" And usually, it's just to talk out the issue helps you, and for a competitor to say at a human level, "Yeah, we had that." I'm not telling you about our secret sauce or how we solved it, but it's a common issue. And just that issue of talking, collaborating, or feeling that somebody else has the issue. We started with 5 people that used to come to this co-opetition, I called it, and now we're 51. Now, we do an awful lot now, but I just think it's important for listeners to recognize that if you are in a senior position in an organization and you're feeling, I'd love to be able to talk to someone or a competitor, it's very natural. It's very normal. And there is a label on it. It's called professional loneliness. It's okay to have that feeling. And it's also okay to ring up your competitor and say, "Do you want to go for a pint?" Or maybe that's a very Irish thing. But we would always say, and you don't have to be talking about secret sauce, and you don't have to be sort of cartelling. It's just about sharing the big issues, sharing the human feelings. So that was the whole concept, Peter, of Host in Ireland, where we set up a competition, how it worked was put away all your individual products and look at Ireland. How can we promote Ireland internationally as a better place to rest your data? That was it, quite simply. And it really was just an excuse for these guys to go drinking with their peers.
I can say that professional loneliness is for sure real, and you feel it over the holidays because you're hanging out with family and you're not really sure what to talk about, right? So you're like, great, let's talk about football. But what you really want to talk about is what you left behind at work and the stuff that the problems you're trying to solve. And so it is great to have a peer group of people that you can spend time with and relate to on the level you want to relate to intellectually.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So this was the sort of the premise of the whole Host in Ireland thing, and of course, once we got people on, you come into Host in Ireland or on 3 bases: that you park your ego, you park your own balance sheet, and you're not an asshole. And if you pass those 3 and you're prepared to rock up, then what we found was people were prepared to explore and find activities of common interest, something that they was outside even of their own sort of bits and bytes and electrons and photons and protons and all that. And what we found was at the time that we needed something tangible. The world is full of Armageddon around climate change. It's real. It's happening. You're in Florida. I'm absolutely sure. My daughter told me actually recently, she said, Dad, there's a real chance within the next 150 years that we'll read about Florida in history books, not geography books. And I said, really? How do you mean? Sea change rising. And she said, we'll only talk about it, what it was. So there you go. It's everywhere, right?
And there's definitely some low-lying areas in Florida. I can tell you that in the city of Miami, they put in, it's about a $400 million pumping station in order to keep the tide out from coming up through the limestone during the season we have called king tide. and you'd start to see floods when there wasn't rain, right? It just it would come up and cars would get flooded. So they put in a pumping station. The irony is that the fossil fuels are needed to mitigate the damage of the climate change, which of course only exacerbates the problem. So it is challenging.
We're definitely in an era right now. We got to weigh up the delta between doing this to achieve that. What's the delta? But don't be afraid that there is a delta. It's like, I'm not sure about North America right now, but in Ireland, for instance, the motor car that's sold the most is the hybrid motor car. It's a hybrid. It gives you 100 in electricity, and it gives you so much. And it's just psychologically much better for particularly people who may have fear of being caught out for range anxiety and all these things. So before you know it, people will go not directly from a fossil burning car to an electric car. They'll do it hybrid wise via a hybrid car. And I guess for all of us, we just hope that that hybrid period, which is now what we're going through, won't be long enough that we won't be able to fix what we're creating in 10, 15 years. But getting back to the pollinators, so it's so vast, it's so great, and these guys are all talking about what can we do, and we all just agreed that we all could relate to a bee. It's tangible. It's a bee. We all see them everywhere. We read. All of us have kids. We read fairy stories still on this, and we basically got to the stage where we looked at that in Ireland, 50% of all of our bees face extinction within 100 years. And it's mainly due to pesticides, pathogens, human behavior, effectively. And we just got ourselves aligned, each company, 52 companies in the digital infrastructure, working with the National Pollinator Plan, government agency here, and said, let's specifically draw one up for the digital infrastructure space. Because a lot of your listeners would know, you go to a data center campus, there's an awful lot of land around it. Just leave it, rewild it, put bees on it, put windflowers on it. And actually what we found it did was, we also have what would you call the digital infrastructure data centers group? We don't have the best relationship with communities because they don't understand what digital infrastructure data centers do. So what we actually did was then we brought all the community groups together and said, okay, we're going to plant 5,500 orchards in every one of your communities. And suddenly, because we humanized the relationship, it helped with people saying, oh, so you don't have horns, you data center people. You actually are normal blokes and normal girls and stuff. So what it did was, it's helping bees, of course, and pollinators and all that type of stuff. But you know what, Peter? When I think about it more, it's helping us. It's helping us as a community to have a project of common purpose that is outdoor, which is extending out to communities, and then has the dividend that it also is helping the biodiversity decline in Ireland. We expanded it internationally then, of course. We rolled out these different stays. And the feedback that we always get is, Jesus, man, a shovel, ground, an orchard, a few little seeds. It's amazing if you're digging a hole with a competitor and you both plant the same tree together, how much you actually get by effects of common purpose. And it's way more than the action. It's more to do with sort of the good feeling of working together and achieving stuff. And it needed to be tangible, because I think we all are suffering a bit from the climate crisis. It's just so big, and what can we do? Whereas this is something we can do, it's tangible, and that's the dividend to it, Peter. So I'd like to think there was a master plan, but like a lot of these things we spoke about earlier, if you get a group of boys and girls that can just set aside their ego for a while and actually just be human and say, you know what, this is what we should do. And if we fail, so what? We tried. But at least we had the right intention to do the right thing. But the dividend always is we get to know each other a bit better.
That makes so much sense. I mean, I think the mentality has to be pro-human, in that we are advancing and we're doing the right things. And instead of beating ourselves up that, oh, we're ruining the planet, we're actually, in a lot of ways, making the planet better. And let's just keep making it better and better and be pro human from the standpoint of we're building this incredible digital infrastructure. And you guys are looking at that and saying, hey, what can we do to make it even better for everybody, for communities? And I think that mentality can work in every industry of just do what we can do. That we don't have to know what no one person is going to be able to do everything. The people that are implementing solutions have to do what they can do. And if we all do what we can do together, it's going to make a difference. And so I think your analogy of bees is awesome because that's how bees work. And look at what they can accomplish.
You're spot on. I mean, there's so many different layers of this that you can get interested in. And the other thing, which I suppose then feeds our human need, is that within a year, you get results. Within 1 year, you get a field full of amazing flowers. Within a year, you get an orchard. Within a year, you get, which, let's be honest, we're humans, so most of us like to see outputs. And a lot of, there's a great saying going back is that you have a really good functioning society when all men are planting trees that they'll never sit under the shade of. That's the psychology that we need to get ourselves to. Whereas a lot of us, unfortunately, are today either burdened with assets or stuff that we must keep doing that to repay. So we've got different issues driving us towards why we do what we do. And that can be a challenge because if you get paid enough to do the worst thing you can, helping you somewhere else, you've got major compromises. We were lucky, right? We're luckier than most that we were able to either collectively make a decision to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons without having to worry about sort of the negative consequences, because there could only be positive consequences.
Absolutely. No, and I think one of the big issues is investors have to get on board with this. And so you look at, say, I like to go back to history, and you look at what the Medicis did, for example. At the time, the church was the great community organizing center, if you will, and they built amazing buildings and infrastructure. And they were bankers. So they were making money, but at the same time, they were reaching out to the community. And we're still talking about them today. So if we can get bankers and investors, and we've got a lot that listen to this, thinking in terms of, okay, how can we also impact the community and still make, and I think your example with the data centers is perfect. So many energy investors are now interested in the digital infrastructure space. The same funds are looking at it for exactly the reason you say, because it's becoming the modern utility. But it's a big building. So you hit the nail on the head. Data center, that center, what can we do to make it a meaningful part of the community and make the community feel like, man, these guys are doing a lot of good for us, and recognize that, hey, every time I pick up my phone, I'm having some interaction with this data center that's in my community maybe in some way or another way, because it's so intimate now, how much time we spend on our phones. It's incredible.
I think that's the irony of the whole thing. When I talk to a lot of people who maybe don't understand what data centers actually do, they think that there's an actual different digital economy to the normal economy. And it's one of the things that I try and ask all of us to stop is this, we're a major player in the digital economy. We're in 2023. There is an economy with digital infrastructure supporting it. There isn't a separate metaverse, different world, because when we paint it like there's a digital economy, if people don't understand it, they think they're missing out, and that's where all the people are making all the money. When in actual fact, we have an economy which has digital infrastructure supporting it, like we have an agriculture economy, like we have a maritime economy. We have a digital economy, which is all part of an overall economy. And when we have language like that and we try and connect with people like that, they go, Oh yeah, so it's not just Facebook and Meta and all that bad stuff and TikTok. No, it's your health system. It's your Revolut or your digital payment system, or it's your Netflix that's being streamed to you, or it's your security system, or it's all around us, and that doesn't run in parallel with walking down the street.
And now
So,
everything is digitized now. Everything is becoming digitized, let's say.
and to the point, therefore, people are using and immersed in the digital world. They don't even know it. And the worst thing we can do, people who do know, is say, oh, yeah, that's part of the digital economy. Because no, it's just part of the economy.
It's part of the world at this point.
It's just part of the world. Wouldn't it be amazing if we were to go back 100 years or 150 years and your listeners here, and we were to say, oh, there's an electrical economy. Huh?
And
Oh,
now,
yeah, electrical economy, and you're not part of it. And the minute you start that, then you get this sort of divides. Oh, you must have to have a load of money to be in that. You must have to be really intelligent. Whereas actually, let's stop all that nonsense and just say we have a functioning society in 2023 that has access to more tools than we ever had. And those tools aren't a chisel, aren't a hammer, and all those traditional tools. They're a keyboard and has access to algorithms. Oh, okay, I get that. A chisel is the same as an algorithm. Yeah, in 2023, it pretty much is.
well, I think that, Gary, that's a perfect lead in for something you said earlier, which is that the tools of change are now available to everybody. And that's what are the implications of that? First of all, explain it and tell us what the implications are of those tools of change being in the hands of everybody.
I guess I'm an 80s guy, right? So I came out of college. I came out of college, and for listeners that are of my age, I was the worst COBOL programmer that was ever invented. I just saw it as a way of getting a job, learn COBOL programming. But how did I learn it? I had to go and get in your terms, a high school certain level of education. I had to go and do an SAT to get into a college. I had to demonstrate that I could count to 10 or whatever else to get. So I had so many things that I had to get over to even get an interview, to get a keyboard into a mainframe to develop a program. Wow. Gee, man. So think of all the talent, the energy, the ideas that just don't have access to all of those steps. 2023, if I have any form of a screen and an internet browser and access to the internet, I can basically get access to tools that I can then say, oh, I wonder if I wanted my screen blue with a yellow tint. And it's there. Oh, I wonder if I had an idea. All those hotel rooms in the winter that are vacant and all the other rooms that people don't use for their vacation homes. Wonder if there's anybody else with this idea, or I have the business idea. Anyone else got the code? Oh, Airbnb. One guy from South Africa, one guy from New Zealand, another dude from wherever. Wow. Coming together, collaborating, different ideas, tried it out. Oh, yeah, I heard of another guy who tried it. It didn't work. Bring him in and we can learn from his mistakes. So suddenly those tools, you just have to have the idea, the passion, but the inhibitor of a lot of it's luck to do whether you're lucky enough to be born in a place with a secondary education, if you're lucky enough to be a girl that has, or unlucky enough to be a girl that doesn't have access to secondary education. All these things now are available to crowdsource, to feel you're part of the community. And I find, unfortunately, because of that old adage with the media and human nature of it, if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. So we only get to see all the negative about TikTok and beyond that, below that, you've got this whole thing going on that's changing people's lives, changing societies. People down in Ethiopia recently got access. Now, I guess this is a sign of the world that we live in. They don't have 7 by 24 access to electricity. They have to walk to get running water. But what's changed their whole village has been access to Wi-Fi. Why? Because now all those things that people have been telling them they should be doing, they can do themselves. How do you eradicate X? How do you make so? There it is. The tools are there. So we don't see a lot of that because it doesn't make the press. Although we do see when 10,000 people die in Ethiopia, because that's feeds the if it bleeds, it leads bit, right? So ultimately, that's why I believe now the tools that are available, but in the same way as the dude who invented fireworks for the Chinese celebration for the king, he didn't know that the unintended consequence was he's just invented gunpowder. So we need to always be mindful that there are consequences and unintended consequences of nearly everything we do. But let's allow ourselves to balance it if we can and see the good and the not so good. And that's why I believe there's more good out of access to tools and services democratized, I guess. You've taken it away from the big corporations. You've taken it away from the research labs that have billions. And you've basically, in 2023, you've more compute power at your fingertips as a citizen of the world than the discovery putting that on the moon had by a time of thousands, right? And that's why we're only at the tip of that, aren't we? We're only at the start of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's amazing, and just the people that we've had come to us on this show, and it's a small show that it's so say media. I think that's another area where the tools of change are in the hands of so many people, because now anybody can become a podcast host, and it's the long tail of covering these topics that would never make it into the mainstream media. So you've got these balancing forces. You have the big media companies whose business model is advertising. So they have to do, if it bleeds, it leads, because it gets more viewers, right? So they're in competition with each other. And then you've got these probably millions of podcasts at this point that are covering everything else and trying to be positive. So which one's going to win? Is it going to be the bees, or, is it going to be the lion? I don't know, but it's anybody's guess. I'm an optimist for sure.
The choice is there.
Yes.
That's the key. The key thing is, 1983, when I came into college, there wasn't the choice. And, my father, just 3 years before that, I remember it was the Olympics were on in Moscow, 1980. And it was just after Afghanistan. And I think the Americans, Canadians, and others boycotted. And a Scottish guy won the 100 meters. Well, a white Scottish guy as well. So it was incredible. It was amazing. It was just amazing, right? And I remember saying to him, I said, God, imagine being the fastest man in the world. And my dad turned around and he said, no, he's not the fastest man in the world. He's the fastest man that got the opportunity. And what he actually wasn't referring to was the boycott. He was referring to, and we've seen it since, haven't we, with the Kenyan runners, the Ethiopian runners, and all the runners from the African continent that now dominate middle distance running. They didn't dominate in 1980. They were faster than the fellas that were running. They just didn't have the opportunity.
Absolutely.
So we can demonstrate it through by giving everyone the opportunity. Eventually we'll get, hopefully, to the best people running the world. That's the right terminology.
There's so much more opportunity now. I mean, we get people that contact us a lot from India, from Nigeria, from the African continent, other countries, sub-Saharan Africa, all over the world, coming to us that we would never have a chance to communicate to back in the 80s, like you say.
Yeah, we can all find, I guess this is the yin and the yang. We can all find a tribe that we basically get, that we can hang out with, that we can feel like we're not the only one, which helps mental health and stuff. But also on the other side, you'll also get these crackpot groups that create their own little virtual world and be. So it's this constant yin and yang. But let's not collectively allow the negative aspect of it overpower so much of the good stuff. because it just goes back, as we said earlier, to 10 boys saved off the coast of Ireland from a hurricane won't get the same headline as one boy unfortunately drowned.
Yeah, we gotta focus on the positive for sure.
So, that's basically the world we live in. So yeah, so in summary, I think that all data centers are a large factory, the modern factory of digital infrastructure, the modern factories of 2023. The data in the centers is the magic. The centers themselves, I guess, in a lot of your listeners, are like the substation. We have to have them, but they don't really turn a lot of people on or turn people off, but we just need them. We have an opportunity because they're new, Peter. They're relatively new. So we don't have a lot of legacy. We don't have like a lot of sort of billions and billions and billions of stuff built in the 70s that we've got to stress as for assets. Most of these things have been built 15 years, if. So the refresh cycle for them is also much quicker. And as we refresh, because of the balance sheet, they try and use different forms of cooling, because cooling is the key thing. And also, as the grids now are starting to be more smart, they're saying, okay, you don't use all the time, but so could you give that whole prosumer thing? And then we get on to hydrogen and all this other stuff. Ultimately, we're going to have to find a way, aren't we? In Ireland, I can speak of 30% of our electricity on our wind farms is what's called curtailed. Basically, I'm sure there are many people on this call that are working out the spreadsheets to say, why can't we just keep it running? And then it's a net zero value into an electrolyzer. To me, as someone who's not fully invested in it, it seems like the way we should be going. And that will only be facilitated by a lot of AI and data and smartness. So we're going to need these centers to help us solve that problem too.
And no, absolutely. And I'll give you the answer to that. That's why everybody's so excited about hydrogen. People argue to me that, oh, hydrogen's expensive, but it's better than just throwing it away, curtailing it. So when you've got that opportunity to, basically what hydrogen is it's an unlimited duration energy storage media. So it's a fuel, bottom line. So if you can take it, make a fuel, you have it, unlimited energy storage, and you can move it the way that you can move a fuel. And they just haven't been able to come up with a battery that can do that, say store energy cost effectively for a week or 2 weeks. It just doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
I think, and Bill Gates hit the nail on the head at least maybe 15, 20 years ago. He said the biggest thing stopping net zero is the lack of long duration energy storage. So that's why everybody's so excited about hydrogen.
Yeah, no. And you can see it on the ground even when your taxi driver starts telling you about this thing called hydrogen, that it's either going to be like cryptocurrency and blow up, or it's going to actually be real.
It'll probably be both. It's like I talk about the internet bubble because I did start in the internet industry in the late 90s, and the bubble burst, and a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that internet thing, it was just like the fax machine, right? But the best time to invest in the internet was right after the bubble burst. The companies that were left, if you put your money in Amazon, you did very well, let's say. So it'll probably be both. There'll always be bubbles, but I think the trend is real.
Yeah, human nature. I mean, what are we? We're 40,000, 4 million, whatever years on this earth. And never has it been so easy to make a few quid and lose a few quid. And human nature is still, I want the short term. I want short termism. It's us.
Yeah, we haven't figured out a way to get rid of greed and fear. It's still there. It's still the driving force.
There you go. I need to bring you along to all my talks because I can talk for 5 minutes and you can summarize it in 2 words. I like your style. I need one of you.
Well, we need each other, Garry, because I'm not much of a presenter, but I love to ask questions and summarize. That's my style.
Yeah. So I guess that's, there's a lot of talk about change and a lot of technologies that will or will not work. And, they're right. Some will and some won't. luck comes into it, doesn't it? A bit of luck comes into it. I won't call the Ukrainian war luck because it's horrendous. It's the most horrendous thing I've ever lived through to see it in real time. But, it happened. I can't stop it. You can't stop it. And the change in psychology, the change in mentality around electricity, generating energy, distribution of energy, more has happened. We go back to our Nelson Mandela quote, everything's impossible till it's not. 11 months ago, if you had told people on this call that X amount percent not coming from Russia by today, they say impossible. Never going to happen. So guess what? It is.
Yeah, necessity drives change. And so I agree with you on the Ukraine war. Is as awful as it is, it's really pushing the move towards more sustainable energy infrastructure, particularly for Europe.
Oh, without question. And it's not just an energy thing, it's a societal thing now. Because if we have to change, then let's change that way. Whereas sometimes back in the day, yeah, we have to change, but let's just do what we've always done because it's the easiest thing to do. You need to now, and I'm seeing even with my children and that, if I tell them ever that's the way we've always done it, that's nearly a catalyst for them to say, well, I'm not going to do it that way. So there must be a better way.
You mentioned the kids, and I hear it again and again and again. We've got to teach the next generation about how energy works, about how data centers work, and I think it's a hugely needed area of and let's call it energy and environment education. And it has to be a different type of education. That, of course, that you need engineers, but you also need smart policymakers and smart business people that take a more holistic approach. And so your pollinator plan, I think, is that kind of thing, right? Where you're looking at a data center and saying, how can we make this great for the community? And if everybody can think that way about what they're doing, I think it's a game changer.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Making it tangible, because it can be difficult, can't it, to imagine something that will only have effect in 40 years or 30 years. And we can talk all we want about creating a better future for our grandchildren and stuff. And that is great and wonderful. And yet we still then go out and buy the latest Samsung device and the latest it's total sort of yin and yang. But once the delta is airing and getting better towards doing the right thing, then our behavior will change from our desire to change and our force from our kids. My kids are changing my behavior, no question about it. Just no question. And some of the things I do now are directly related to, oh God, I couldn't face me 14-year-old by telling her I did that. So we're getting a train. I'm getting a train, and I'm going to tell her I got a train.
Well, Garry, this has been absolutely awesome. Before we go,
yeah,
I'd love it if you could plug your podcast a little bit. Tell us what it's about and who your audience is, and anything else that you'd like our audience to hear, which are mostly large scale investors in the energy industry, as well as CEOs and founders of great large and small energy companies.
Okay, I'll do it in reverse. So in terms of investment in digital infrastructure, it's 15 years old. We're only starting to actually fully appreciate what type of digital infrastructure we're going to need for the smart world. That's the word we want to use. You mentioned metaverse earlier. And we're only at sort of 2.0 of the web, as they say. And we're only dabbling with 3.0 at the moment. And, blockchain and all this type of stuff. So what we're going to see at the moment, we see Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris, North Virginia, Singapore, Hong Kong, at big locations with lots of centers. Actually, what's going to happen is that they'll remain as core locations, but it's all going to trickle out to what they call the edge. And the edge is where the people are, where the activity is, where the eyeballs are, and where the other IP addresses are. So when we talk about digital infrastructure, it's a bit like a human body. You've got hearts, you've got spleens, you've got livers, but you've also got at the tip of every finger, you've got nerve endings. And the nerve endings are going to be the edge data centers. And they're basically going to take messages or send messages back. So what we're going to see over the next 6 to 7 years is really digital infrastructure becoming like a utility, where it's everywhere. How it gets there is going to change. Some of your investors are looking at Bezos's Starlink stuff, or Elon Musk's Starlink. That low orbital satellite stuff is revolutionizing places like Africa and like 6,500 islands in the Philippines. How do you get secure infrastructure to 6,500 islands and call it one society? The easiest way is to beam it down. So you've got all these different technologies that people want access to. So that's what we call digital infrastructure all the way. And that's probably similar to the evolution. And history repeats itself, particularly when it works. And many of your audience probably go back to the days of how did electricity take, it started off with water wheels. Then 3 or 4 guys in a community said, why don't we stop having one water wheel and go and have one larger, centralized for all of us? And in a way, now we're going back the other way. That's just human nature. We're going back out to and data centers are at we just got to the stage where we've said, let's get all the water wheels, put them into one location. Now we've decided, no, let's not have all the water wheels in one location. Let's put them back out. So all within the last 15 years, huge investment opportunities, centralized data centers, infrastructure as in fiber, metropolitan networks, anything, the concept of water or the concept of electricity. But think of it as the days when we decided that we're centralize all the water wheels. It's just the early days. And that's why the investment funds, you mentioned it earlier, we're seeing more and more. It used to be a boutique type asset class because it was an unknown asset class. Now what we see is the real estate investment trusts over the last 3 to 5 years have really come in strong. They were dedicated real estate investment trusts, digital infrastructure. Now we're seeing the mainstream who are in water, electricity, toll roads, and any other form of utility saying, oh, must get into the digital infrastructure stuff. And that's what's driving it globally. In terms of the bits, bytes, and banter, you know what? It's exactly what it says in the tin. It's like this show, which is why I like this show and I accepted this invite. It's not prescribed. We don't even ask any questions. We get good people who've got a good story, usually in the digital infrastructure space. That's the bits and bytes. And the banter bit is where we go sort of freestyle. And I must say, I've even surprised myself on your show. I don't think I've cursed more than twice on the Bits, Bytes, and Banter show. That basically is your audition. If you don't say the F word at least 3 times before we get to the first minute, you're not going to be part of the show. So it's exactly what we say: Bits, Bytes, and Banter. Let's talk about punch cards to floppy disks to mushrooms to bees. It's more about trying to understand people, human behavior, irrespective of your industry, tends to be pretty consistent. The tools we use, the environments we find ourselves, and that's why I like talking to good people who have a good story. And that's why this week, for instance, we've got an ex-Irish rugby player who is now working in the digital infrastructure space. And what am I talking to him about? Change. Imagine, and I'm really looking forward to it because 2 years ago, he used to run out in front of 85,000 people chanting his name. Today, he goes into a sales meeting with 4 other guys and they talk about funnels. That's change for you. So that's a story. If he can be successful having gone from that accolade to this, then we can learn from him. How do you do that? And I'll be able to tell you next Monday because this Thursday I'll be interviewing him. But that's an interesting story of change that isn't prescribed because they're quite elite, those types of people who go from 80,000 people to 4 people in a room talking about funnels.
And now that's incredible, Garry, and amazing that you're having a rugby player like that on there. And I agree with you. I played a little college football myself, and it is an experience to run out to all those people cheering for you. I can't even imagine 85,000. I think maybe the biggest I ever had was about 15,000. But man, that's unbelievable.
it's a rush, and it's obviously your careers in those professions are so short, and I guess there are a finite number. American football is obviously a different sport, but in rugby, there's a very finite that after they stop playing can continue to be involved in the sport. So I guess what I'll be asking them about is how do you apply yourself with the same learnings as turning up to the rugby pitch to train into what you're doing now, and how hard is it? And because those professional athletes are way more than just being able to run very fast. They've a lot of stuff that they've had to condition and change. And I guess it'll be interesting for me, certainly, to find out about.
No, absolutely. Garry, how can they find your podcast? Is it LinkedIn? Is it
Yeah.
where do they find it?
Onto LinkedIn, Garry Connolly, Bits, Bites and Banter. There's links like your own to the live show, and it goes out to YouTube and all the rest. Actually, we use this platform too, Restream. It's great.
It is a great platform. I'll plug Restream. It makes it a lot easier to touch multiple platforms. And, when you're trying to run a business, you got to stick to the simple ways of doing things because, if you're not a full-time media person, you've got to keep it simple.
I guess this is a nice way to finish, Peter, because this is a tool platform that allows you very easy to do something that is good. And I'm sure you do it for multiple reasons, but you just couldn't have done 5 years ago, period. Without you'd have to have a slew of people. You'd probably have to have a degree in videography yourself. Now you rock up, you go into Restream, you link it to your LinkedIn, you link it to your YouTube, you turn up and you just let the magic happen. And that's why I'm saying about these tools that are now available, either for you in your professional capacity, in your social capacity, or just a hobby. It's great. It's just wonderful. This is all the digital infrastructure we've been talking about allows you to do.
It is amazing. And I'll also plug an app called Descript we use, which your point about video editing, Descript just takes the whole transcription and lets you edit it like text, like a Word document. So you don't even have to have video editing capability anymore, which is pretty amazing. That was a big barrier for us and our team in doing this, because we're investment bankers, right? So we're not experts in this stuff, but we're out there trying to talk to cool people and have fun with it.
Yeah. It's a bit like, for what it's worth, I was a terrible COBOL programmer. Now, when I say terrible, really, really worst ever. But I loved PowerPoint. Loved it. I loved it because it allowed me to tell stories without loads of text. But because I loved it, I used to look at all the features and all the different screen things and all the rest. And it made me want to do more presentations because I could really engage myself in it. It's a bit like great programmers that are also then leaders of businesses. They know the capabilities of the programming tools. And that's why you get magic, because they question, well, what if we were to twist that algorithm with this algorithm, put the two together and plop? And that's really why these tools, and I'm sure you're more encouraged to do more of this because the tools are easy. You can engage with them.
Absolutely. When the tools are easier, then it frees up the right portion of your brain, the creative part, because when the tools are hard, it's like the left and right brain are in conflict. You're trying to, create, but you're also having to fight with the tool at the same time.
My goodness, we may have just had a banker acknowledge there's a right side to the brain.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this is a moment. This is a moment.
That's what it's all about. I think we could get into quantum mechanics, but I think the creative spark is what unleashed the universe in my mind. So you've got to hit that side of the brain.
You're absolutely spot on. And it's a wonderful way to end off this session. I thank you again. It's been real fun talking to a banker that uses the right side of his brain. Well, I've met that fella. I've met that.
Good stuff. We're not all geeks and spreadsheet jockeys.
You see, this again goes back to what I was saying earlier about put your ego and your balance sheet and your conditioning on the shelf. Come into a room and find things of common interest, and it's just amazing the amount of common interest when we take off our labels. And then we sort of, when you played American football and I played soccer and another dude played rugby, within a half an hour, we'll be able to talk about parallels, opportunities and stresses. And none of us like training, but we loved when we ran out in front of 15,000 people. And suddenly then we feel, oh, he's okay. He might be a banker, but he's okay.
Not a bad guy, right? Garry, this has been awesome.
Right.
Garry Connolly, thank you for being on Energy Superheroes, and you're certainly making a difference in the world of digital infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, and best of luck.